You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Hello, I'm Stephen Willis with the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, and I'm joined by the Florida football scout here to bring you all kinds of good information. But before we get started with that, I do want to let you know that LinkedIn is the college football recruiting sponsor across the Locked On Podcast Network. LinkedIn helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster and for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnCollege. Terms and conditions apply. Brian Smith, the Florida football scout, is in the house. We are getting ready for official visit season, so the news is about to start picking up considerably. But right now is a little bit of a slow time, and I figured that we would talk to you about, with the news this week, that everything is all clear with Deion Smith, and he is going to be arriving finally at Ole Miss. What do you remember about Deion Smith? What do you know about him as a player?
I just remember how fast he was for a long-legged kid. He could also break down and make guys miss, but he made the clutch catches down the field like because of speed. That's the one thing that's obvious. I'm not going to harp on it. There's a reason he was the number one JUCO. He can fly. But the size and the ability to make guys miss too, it's something you can't take lightly, because he can take a screen and make a couple guys get out of position, go around him, and then again, at the end, he's going to use that speed and he's going to score. He's going to play a lot of minutes for Ole Miss if he can pick up the playbook.
Yeah, last season when he was at Holmes County Community College, the smallest yards per catch in a game that he had during the course of the season was 17 yards.
Now, I know it's JUCO comp, but there's still good players in Mississippi JUCO. That's a sign of what he's capable of. And it's probably also a good sign that he's locked in, because even if, he's more talented than everybody on the field, I get it. There's not many people that can do that. So Ole Miss has another weapon. So again, he just needs to pick up the offense. That's not easy, but at least working him into the rotation early in the year, and by mid-season, you'd think this is a guy that could make a lot of plays for the Rebs.
Yeah, and if you look at it, like Trey Harris at Ole Miss was the number one player in the Southeastern Conference against single coverage a year ago. So everybody is going to have to double Trey Harris, or you're going to get obliterated because he is going to blow you up. Ask Penn State about that. Deion Smith makes Ole Miss nearly undouble teamable. Which wide receivers? Because you're not going to put the double team just sitting on Trey Harris and let Deion Smith, who is an explosive wide receiver, just tear you open in the middle of the field with Juice Wells and Jordan Watkins and Caden Priestcorn. This wide receiver unit, Lane Kiffin, I think he's built something. Almost 2019 LSU, 2022 Tennessee type something.
Well, now the question is, can they all be on the same page in critical moments? Like that LSU team, they almost lost a few games, like that Texas game to start the year. But it was those key receivers making plays at the fourth quarter. Well, like Jefferson scored a late touchdown in that game. Now Ole Miss has got to prove they can do that. The pieces I'm not concerned with. I think Trey's a great start, but I mean, they've got other guys like Priestcorn, et cetera, that will burn you if you allow them to. So now, can you all play together? Can you get along? Can you be happy with sharing the football, et cetera? That's how you win in a team sport.
Let's move on to 2025. And Jerome Myles, the wide receiver out of Corner Canyon in Utah, got his 5th star on 24/7. And we talked about him on the show a couple of weeks back, and his ranking was all over the place. I mean, it was. And you talked about how there's just not football scouts out in Utah. They just probably haven't. Yeah, they haven't seen him. And then all of a sudden he commits to Ole Miss. In track, he ran a 10.2 or a 10.300, just obliterating the Utah State record at 210 pounds. Very A.J. Brown-like, honestly, if we're going to be real about that. This Ole Miss is going to be in for a fight to officially keep this kid.
Yeah, now that his track times and stuff are out there, I'm sure Oregon will want to get in on him. I wouldn't be surprised if Texas called him, Ohio State, etc. That's an elite football player. I listened to Andrew Ivins talk about him, and he thought he was one of the very best deep threats in the country, which, if you're running sub 10.5, that's kind of explanatory. But watching him run routes on film, he's a pretty fluid athlete too. He's not just a guy that can run on a line. He can move, he can break. I think this is a kid that can play pretty early at most schools. And of course, Kiffin has a reputation with the passing game. So I don't see why he wouldn't be an immediate impact for the Rebels.
Yeah, and everybody, before they start worrying about it, he was all over Twitter saying, come to the SIP and all that. He's all in right now with Ole Miss, but also there's 6 months until signing day. We'll see what happens. And there's also another 5-star within the state of Mississippi that no matter what anybody tells you, Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss is going to be in as long as they possibly can. They have a chance for a dual 5-star this year.
Yeah, Caleb Cunningham's a special player, and I'm sure he'll visit 4 or 5 schools, but like Florida State, Auburn, Mississippi State, LSU, everybody's going to try to get him on campus. And there's a long way to go for him too. I don't even know who's leading for him now. I know Mississippi State was rumored early, but that's going to be a national recruitment.
And of course, there's a Kylan Deere. He is going to be the story. We talked. I think he's the best running back in the country. You think he's the best running back in the country. And Ole Miss is going to be in a dogfight there. But if you look at the type players that Lane Kiffin is recruiting at the high school level, this is the change, not necessarily from the transfer portal, because I'm not saying he's de-emphasizing the transfer portal. I'm saying that he's just having more success on the high school recruiting trail.
That's the key. If you're going to win, having guys in your system for longer, it's going to lead to fewer turnovers, fewer penalties, more cohesiveness, and probably a better locker room. So like getting a kid like Deion out of the JUCO ranks is fine, but like constantly just relying on the portal is usually not the greatest recipe to make it to the title game. So I think it would be best if they could, and I'm sure they're trying to anyway, but all of a sudden they're kind of getting through and getting some of the kids they didn't used to land. And that's key.
Yeah. Win 11 games in a season. That's weird how that happens, right?
Yes.
Anyway, thank you for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. When we come back, Brian is going to give me his top running backs in Ole Miss football history. But first, Gametime is an authorized ticket marketplace of the NBA, which makes getting playoff tickets even faster and easier. Prices on Gametime actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off. And with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. They have views from all the seats in the venues, the lowest price guarantee, event cancellation protection, job loss protection. They've got the best customer service in the business. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Again, terms apply. Create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute ticket, lowest prices guaranteed. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home that big win of your own. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's right. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, it's America's #1 sportsbook. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all of that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 streaming channel programmed for you each and every single day to bring you the biggest stories without all of that screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, so the Florida football scout, Brian Smith, is in the hot seat today. We are talking about the top running backs in the history of Ole Miss. Brian is not an Ole Miss guy, so he can't get into the weeds like some of our guests, but he does know a couple of them. We're going to start out, what is it, number 3? We'll start with number 3.
I got Ben Jarvis Green. I just remember how consistent he was. Played a couple years at IU, was really good. Then he went to Ole Miss, had a couple 1,000-yard seasons. Pretty good running back in the NFL too. But the thing about him, more than anything else that I remember, is this: he was a workhorse. He was a guy that could take a lot of carries, take a lot of pounding, and just keep on chugging. Really, really liked watching him play at the college and pro level. Next is the kid that you and I have discussed a few times, and that's Dexter McCluster. Obviously, he was just so athletic. Been around some of his family in the state of Florida. Really athletic guy. Kind of fits what Kiffin likes to do with smaller running backs, guys that are just shifty, whatever, however you want to say it. Really fast. He's just a lot of fun to watch. That guy could have played 4 or 5 different positions. It didn't really matter. He just kind of labeled as a running back. Best is one of the kids I actually interviewed a long time ago, and that's Deuce McAllister. Another kind of like Green, a power guy, really good in the NFL for the Saints. But man, when he was at Ole Miss, like even at his size, he ran away from guys. That was a truly elite running back. I think that was an easy pick for me because as soon as I saw your question, I'm like, well, I know who my number one guy is, barring something I don't remember. So I did some research. I'm like, yeah, he's the best guy. So I would go Deuce.
Deuce he played in the 90s, but he's the type running back like Marcus Dupree, Bo Jackson, Herschel Walker, that type of back that was 225 pounds, could run like a deer. You didn't see many of those in the 90s. Seemingly everybody grew them on trees in the early 80s. But he took that into the 90s. And honestly, Ole Miss, like people might not know this, but Ole Miss was struggling when Deuce McAllister got to Ole Miss. They were just coming off probation, all of that stuff. That started a bowl run and eventually grew Ole Miss up into what they are right now. It started 25 years ago with Deuce McAllister, Romero Miller, Rufus French, and all those guys coming in with Tommy Tuberville.
Yeah, that was a different time because, I mean, Ole Miss wasn't thought about that much. And when they got him, it kind of helped change their program. I mean, you had to bring your lunch pail to bring him down on every play. He was a load. So big time player.
The 97 team, Ole Miss had 2 first-round draft picks in the backfield, him and John Avery.
Well, there's nothing wrong with that.
You can win some football games when that happens, man.
It's amazing how that works.
Yeah, it's weird. So what do you got going on this week as the official visit season starts? Are they in the dead period right now?
I think the 31st is the next weekend, but that's when everybody's bringing kids in. Right now, it's just gearing up and resting before it, to be honest with you. Just watching a lot of film, making sure I got all my lists right. But starting on the 31st of May, everything really changes. That's next weekend. So we're close.
Yeah, we've gotten the point where June is basically high school recruiting. It's going to be official visits all during the month. Once you get to July, you're getting ready for media days. And then it's here, man.
Yep, we're back to the season. So we're at the end of the dead period of time where, there's not much to talk about. We got about another week.
Yeah, it should be pretty good. Anyway, thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Brian Smith, the Florida football scout, thank you very much for coming on, buddy, and we'll talk to you next week.
All right, buddy. Take care.